Hillary Clinton was asked a question by a Greenpeace activist at a rally this week, and she was not happy about it.
Climate change, will you act on your words and reject fossil fuel money in the future in your campaign?
I do not. I have money from people who work for fossil fuel companies. I am so sick. I am so sick of the Sanders campaign lying about me. I'm sick of it.
I agree with you with Sanders on the conference.
So admittedly, it's a little bit difficult to hear because of the loud music blaring, but the Greenpeace activist asked if she would stop accepting money from fossil fuel companies, and she responded that she takes money from people who work for them. Now, her campaign released a statement insisting it has not taken a dollar from oil and gas industry PACs or corporations, which is technically true. She has not taken any money directly from oil companies, since you can't do that. That is true. We're going to get to some of the numbers in just a little bit. Now, she immediately pivoted, of course, to assuming that that woman, despite the fact that I think she identified herself as a Greenpeace activist, has to simply be a plant of the Sanders campaign, or is simply echoing comments and talking points from the Sanders campaign. But the Greenpeace Democracy campaign director has put out this statement: Secretary Clinton cannot ignore the voices of activists asking her to reject fossil fuel money or explain away the more than $1 million she takes from fossil fuel lobbyists. Secretary Clinton is conflating Greenpeace with the Sanders campaign, but we are an independent organization, and our research team has assessed the contributions to all presidential candidates. In terms of those monies, before our commentary, why don't we just go through the numbers? According to the Centers for Responsive Politics, her campaign has received more than $300,000 from oil and gas industry employees this cycle, many of whom are lobbyists or affiliated with those companies. For comparison, Bernie Sanders has received a little more than $50,000 from the industry by that same metric, while John Kasich has received $115,000 and Ted Cruz more than $1 million. Ted Cruz is doing quite well for himself amongst those
Well, when
people.
you're the senator from Texas,
That is true.
It helps. You know, and we should also, I think it's worth pointing out that the $307,000, which is what the Clinton campaign has gotten from workers, they say workers in the oil and gas industry, it represents 0.2% of all the money that she has taken in from donations. It's a large number to hear, 307,000, generally speaking. And unfortunately, in this day and age, it's not a huge part of what she has taken in. And one thing that I think is the most pointed criticism to what Hillary Clinton said there is the fact that the real reference here is that there was a pledge that Sanders signed in January that he would not take money from the oil and gas and fossil fuel industry. She has not signed that. Now, again, the numbers are not that wild, and I think that the real question then becomes how much money has the Clinton Foundation taken from these people, how much of her super PACs, which she's not responsible for, and I don't think, they're all beyond reproach because of the system they're in. But I think that, I think her point on this, her frustration over this, is that she really, in terms of the amounts of money that have been taken in, none of the Democrats have taken very much money in. She much more than Sanders. But
yeah, well, I mean, look, if you say $250,000, it sounds like a lot. But I mean, look, $300,000, that's like 90 minutes of a Hillary Clinton speech. It's really not that much money.
That's true. But 0.2% of all the money she's taken in.
No, but okay, look, wait, let's get the full picture here. I don't know why we're burying the lead here. First of all, she's taking money in different layers. Yes, the $307,000 is from employees of oil and gas companies. There's a second layer, which is some of those oil company lobbyists bundling money for her. That's $1.2 million. Okay, and then there's a third layer, which is $4.5 million if you include the super PACs. Now, you say she doesn't have control over them, but that's a joke, right?
Well, I'm saying that that's not what this, that's not what the pledge addressed. That's not what this was about, because candidates. Listen, you can be as skeptical as you want about these super PACs, and I am just as skeptical, and I am too. But the point is, I mean, the laws are the laws, and the rules about those are as such that she cannot control or solicit directly and talk about that money in this framework. And that pledge doesn't. The pledge that Sanders signed has nothing to do with super PACs. The pledge they want her to sign has nothing to do with super PACs. It's just her campaign.
Right. Now, Bernie Sanders' campaign doesn't have any super PACs. So they didn't get $4.5 million. Hillary Clinton does have a super PAC. Oh, golly gee, it happened to take a lot of money from the oil companies. Is she not aware that she's gotten $4.5 million, including her super PACs? Of course she's aware, right? So, but that gets to the actual essential question here, which Michael was getting at. To them, they think they're genuinely frustrated because they think, what's the big deal? So by the way, there's a fourth layer, again, Michael mentioned it, which is the Clinton Foundation. ExxonMobil and others have given a lot of money to the Clinton Foundation as well.
I think that's a higher level. But
yes,
in
yes,
the hierarchy.
So and it involves more money, et cetera, right? But the reason they're frustrated is they're like, what? Yeah, people give to the Clinton Foundation. Yeah, they give to my super PACs. Yes, I've hired many lobbyists who used to work for TransCanada, who used to work for Exxon, who used to work for all these places. But what am I supposed to do? Not hire people who used to be lobbyists? Then who the hell would I hire? Well, Sanders would say you would hire people who actually care, right?
Yeah.
You know, that have worked in government but not gone through the revolving door and not been lobbyists, et cetera, right? But to her, she's expressing her frustration like, this is business as usual. I don't know what you want me to do about it. And what people are saying is, yeah, you're not getting it. We don't like business as usual. It's not a great excuse that Ted Cruz took more money than you did from the oil companies. You're still taking money. And what you don't realize is that you're being influenced because these people now are your consultants. They consult you. They tell you what they think is the right thing to do, and you view that as no big deal. Because hey, Bob's been consulting me for a long, long time, but he's been consulting you to be pro oil and gas companies for a long, long time.
But how do you then? And I'm asking you, a real question here. Reconcile the fact that all of her rhetoric on climate change, on going after Exxon specifically, all of that is so disconnected from the $307,000 or $4.5 million.
It's super easy to reconcile that because her rhetoric was totally pro those companies until a couple of months ago when she got scared by Bernie Sanders in elections.
I don't think you can always call her a climate change denier.
No,
I don't think,
but Michael,
she's always she has put that on at the forefront of both. Of both of her campaigns for president and her campaign for Senate.
No,
she has talked about climate change. Yes, that's fact.
She has talked about it.
No, so let's be clear on that. So Michael makes good points, and fair is fair, right? So of course she's not a climate denier, but it's really damning with faint praise to say, okay, she's not a lunatic, right? And she has talked a lot about climate change. Wes and Michael are right about that. Now, but when it comes to taking action, she was for the TPP, which helps, a lot of these oil and gas companies overall. She was for the Keystone XL pipeline. She was for fracking. All three of those positions she changed during this campaign.
But it's still more pro-fracking. Far more pro-fracking.
I would say that's right. And I think that she was new. I mean, she was unannounced on the others. And when she started campaigning, then she took a position. With fracking, though, that's problematic.
She was not unannounced on TPP.
She was also part of an administration, which is a little bit different when something comes up.
Okay, but look at the conversation we're having. All the reasons that she's pro oil and gas until really pressed in a Democratic primary, and then she kind of switches her position. If you don't think she'll switch it back, you're not paying any attention to politics. She will definitely switch her position on many of those issues right back to where her donors want it to be if she wins. Okay, by the way, that's what President Obama did in a lot of instances as well. But the fact that others do it and that business as usual is corruption doesn't excuse the corruption. There is one candidate who is not for that corruption. So if you're choosing between two candidates, one bathed in corruption and thinks, is flummoxed at the idea that you wouldn't be corrupt, and another candidate that isn't corrupt at all.
If you're going to say it's not a climate, she's not a climate. I don't want to get into defending any candidates here either. No. But if you're going to say she's not a climate denier, you can't say she's flummoxed over the idea that she cannot get away with corruption. I don't think that's a fair.
But she is. She's like, what do you mean? Of course, I take money from the employees of oil and gas companies. Of course.
She's saying that because she didn't sign the pledge. She's taken that 307 or whatever it is. But I also think that you parse this stuff down and you look at who the people that are giving this money to Hillary Clinton. It could be somebody who works for Exxon who likes Democratic politics and likes Hillary Clinton.
So, Michael, you're right about that. And for example, employees of those companies have given $50,000 to Bernie Sanders.
Correct.
Right? Okay, now it's nowhere near the $4.5 million overall.
But the employees are not, wait a second. The employees, forget that other. So we're talking about the people that gave $307,000 here. Okay?
No, I'm talking about the $4.5 million.
No, you are, but that's not just. That's not. Those aren't workers sending $27 to Bernie Sanders and $100 to Hillary Clinton.
A good portion gave the maximum allowable by law and work as lobbyists.
And the people that work as lobbyists also. I mean, you can take this conversation in many directions. People who work as lobbyists, as Wes knows, that you could be an oil and gas lobbyist. You could also be a lobbyist for the lumber industry, and you could also be a lobbyist.
That's exactly my point, which is that they're like, all my guys are lobbyists. What do you want me to do?
Well, I mean, so there's overlap everywhere. So you could call almost any lobbyist an oil and gas lobbyist. Not true, but I mean, it's not a real exaggeration. But the point I'm making, Cenk, is that some of this is about the people who give money in small donations and maximum donations personally who happen to work for companies, and they also happen to like Democrats.
Tiny percentage.
Right.
So when she says,
Right, a
she
tiny
says,
percentage.
well, these people who are giving to me, well, you know, she literally said in one of these quotes here, they're going to find out that I'm working against their interests. Now, they didn't give you $4.5 million because they think that you're working against their interests. They know who you've been. You have a 40-year record. Nobody's going to be surprised. If Bernie Sanders is a 40-year record, he didn't get $4.5
But
million.
the sophisticated donors are also giving you're going to see a lot of people who gave to Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton. I'm
Yeah,
sure
exactly.
that that's the
To
case.
cover their bets,
Which is
probably
a good
do.
point.
Which is what happens. And I'm not
But still,
defending
with the
it. I mean,
expectation
clearly,
that it
if you
will
don't
matter.
like this, then you should support and give money and do all you can to get Bernie Sanders elected. But I do think that there is a legitimate gripe on the part of Clinton, who has really tried to steer clear in terms of her rhetoric on the issue, and that makes it a little frustrating for her.
Okay, let me talk about it a little bit on the gripe. Okay, first, she immediately says, I'm tired of Bernie Sanders, which was not a mistake. That was, I'm getting in a
she's ready to do it.
confrontation, and Bernie Sanders, people are saying bad things about me. What people don't really get about the Democratic Party is it's incredibly disorganized. And there's not really that much money for most people. And most people who are going to shout at you do it because they believe in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Not that anyone said, hey, go out there and tell her, ask her how much money she's gotten from going. They don't do that.
Yeah.
And on the global warming side, I mean, okay, listen, she doesn't deny it exists. But, you know, when I look at Hillary Clinton, and I know her, and I know Bill, it's going to be a continuation of the Obama administration, which, personality-wise, I think Obama and his wife are great. He's been a great president. I think in terms of the challenges that we're all facing for our future, those of us who aren't 70 years old and going to kick it in 10 years, it's
so I
fucking
can drop
scary
out of this one.
that nobody's doing anything. I mean, that the view of that generation, the majority of them in their late 60s and early 70s is, okay, here's the science on climate change. We'll pass some measure that'll come into effect in 2030. It's always 2030, 2040, 2050. Like, it's not like we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of this decade. Like, it's never that. And Bernie Sanders approaches it like, hey, dude, this is a World War II level, which I think it's more. This is an existential thing for the United States and everybody out there who's under the age of 60. It's going to affect you. Like, not 20 years, in 10 years, it's going to affect you. And if we don't do something about it now and take drastic actions, we're fucked. Scientific term, but
Yeah.
So then Michael, in one of the things he says there, it winds up being the most right? So if you care about this as much as Wes does, and you want somebody who doesn't find it normal to take money from oil and gas lobbyists, and well, then you're going to vote for Bernie Sanders. If you don't, you're making a mistake. Or maybe you care more about other issues, or you don't want a revolution, you don't want to break up big banks, or you don't want higher taxes.
Or you believe that Hillary Clinton will actually do something, will care about it more than you believe she will when it comes to climate change. So
That's an untenable position.
that's not, well, I mean, it's not untenable because she is saying that, and if you are listening to her, but if she's saying that, and if you are listening to her, and you are somebody who believes that she would be a good president, then you can believe that part of her rhetoric. And the same,
Right. So again, Michael's right about that in this way, right? So if you think, hey, we can't get the level of change that Wes is talking about, it's not doable. So let me just get the 5-10% change. And I think Hillary Clinton can give me 5 to 10% change. She's more pragmatic, and she's going to work with the Republicans. She's going to give them tax cuts and other things, and I'm going to get a reduction of X amount by 2030 or 2050. Then yeah, Hillary Clinton's your candidate.
Hillary Clinton has obviously, in I think every one of these primary elections, she's done much worse than Bernie amongst young people. And she has been asked that multiple times. Sometimes she's tried to answer, sometimes she's evaded. I think that one way that she might not be connecting with young people is that this is just the most recent in a series of interactions. And I know she meets with a lot of people at these events, but she seems viscerally frustrated with youth activism because she constantly gets approached by young activists who coincidentally in all the viral videos tend to be women. Generally, they tend to be minority women. And she reacts as if it's the biggest inconvenience in the world to be presented with young people who are passionate about something. This is a Greenpeace activist. She sees it as it has to be a plant of the Bernie Sanders campaign or somebody who is simply bought in because they have no thoughts of their own into the messaging of the Bernie Sanders campaign. No, like Greenpeace has cared about fossil fuel campaign donations and the future of American energy policy for a long time. It didn't take Bernie Sanders and his campaign ads to convince them, and by virtue of that, this young activist, to care about that issue.